now is directly right in John Podesta's wheelhouse, as we found out through his brother. And according to these court papers, as I've been reading through them, released today as part of Manafort's plea deal, what do we find out? Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Well, they granted a member of Manafort's lobbying firm an audience in 2013 so he could lobby them on behalf of Ukraine's pro-Kremlin president. So I guess that means that Obama and Biden have now been implicated in Russia collusion. Anyway, Politico points out Manafort's pro-Ukraine campaign reached the top levels of the White House, with one of the members of his lobbying effort meeting President Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden in 2013. According to these new court papers, a member of the so-called Habsburg Group, which comprised former European politicians Manafort convened as part of a lobbying effort in support of Ukraine's then president, came with a foreign prime minister May 16, 2013, to meet with Biden and Obama, as well as a senior U.S. official in executive and legislative branches. Alan Friedman, a former journalist based in Europe who helped Manafort launch the group, told Manafort after the meeting that a member of the Habsburg Group delivered the message of not letting Russians steal Ukraine from the West. And the lobbying effort that caught prosecutors' attention tried to persuade the U.S. government to support the pro-Ukrainian guy that was being represented. And anyway, it goes on. In fact, the guy's name is Viktor Yanukovych is his name, and he's now on trial for treason in Ukraine for selling his country out to Russia. Shocker of all shockers. Can't believe it. Why didn't we hear about this information before? What else do we have? We have one other note that I found here, because this gets more interesting by the second. And I don't think we're getting the truth. Now, Bob Woodward himself dropped a pretty major bombshell earlier today about the investigation that he did for his new book, with all the talk about what Bob Woodward was saying about fear. Actually, I would say the one word you can use for President Trump is fearless. He doesn't care what anybody else thinks. He's going forward with his agenda. He doesn't care if people don't like his tweets, and he doesn't need to be liked by the liberal media, obviously. Anyway, Woodward said Friday that he conducted a thorough investigation into possible Trump-Russia collusion while researching his latest book, Fear, Trump in the White House. Quote, but he found no evidence of a conspiracy. Question, did you, Bob Woodward, hear anything in your research or your interviews that sounded like espionage or collusion? Hugh Hewitt asked him. I did not. Of course, I look for it. I look for it hard. And he says, we're going to see what Mueller has, Woodward said, but you saw no collusion. I have not. Well, why isn't that being heralded on fake news, CNN and MSNBC? Oh, I guess it doesn't fit their political narrative in any way, shape, manner, or form. You see how this works with the media? Anyway, so you got this last-minute attack against Brett Kavanaugh. I don't think that's going to work very well. I mean, after promising not to leak, well, they're leaking apparently less than 24 hours after the Senate Judiciary Committee Vice Chair, former Chinese intelligence asset, Dianne Feinstein, she promised not to divulge details about the allegation from a woman who claimed that Brett Kavanaugh committed some kind of sexual misconduct against her when she was in high school. The details now shockingly have been mysteriously leaked. New York Post says the woman who wrote the letter to lawmakers accusing Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct claimed that he held her down and tried to force himself on her during an alcohol-fueled high school party in the 80s. According to the New Yorker article published on Friday, Kavanaugh was a student at a Jesuit-run Georgetown prep school in Bethesda, Maryland, met the woman, attended a nearby high school, and apparently at a party this went down, according to Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer. The woman wrote that Kavanaugh held her down, tried to force himself on her after he and a pal, who had both been drinking, turned up the volume of the music that was playing to drown out her protests. Kavanaugh said she also covered her mouth with his hand, but was eventually able to get free and to flee. Allegedly, this took place decades ago. The woman said that the memory was so troubling that she had to seek psychological treatment. She didn't want to be identified. She first approached a California Democrat and then turned it over to Dianne Feinstein. Kavanaugh denies that this ever happened. I categorically, unequivocally deny this allegation. 65 other women that knew him in high school have come forward to say that that's not the guy that they knew. Unbelievable. I mean, this is a new low, this 11th hour smear against Kavanaugh, somewhat reminiscent the attacks against Clarence Thomas. They're going back 40 years now. Kavanaugh is poised to win confirmation with 55 votes. And, if Feinstein says the individual strongly requested confidentiality, declined to come forward, declined to press the matter, and that she's honored that decision, apparently she didn't honor that decision. Anyway, 800-941-SEAN, our number, if you want to be a part of the program. Sarah and Greg at the top of the hour. It looks like this is now all of the onions that we've peeled. Every layer of it is now creating such trouble for the upper levels of the DOJ, FBI, CIA, DNI, and Mueller's office that I'm getting a sense that they may want this to come to an end sooner than later. Just a sense. I don't know for sure.
When you bring up an integrity issue, and it's interesting, you and the gentleman from Texas raised this in a way that almost, approaches. It is insulting.
The gentleman may answer that question.
If you're going to make
so what I'm going to respond to is what I'm saying. I am here under oath. I am not lying. I have never lied under oath, and I never will. And so the insinuation, not even the insinuation, the direct comment that you somehow say you have an integrity issue is insulting. I take offense. It is incorrect. Nothing I
never mentioned your personal life. I just simply said the amount of time that you were spending on the taxpayers' dollar, wasting it when you were supposed to be doing your job, texting back and forth to the court. Is a problem.
And what I'm saying is,
and the gentleman has already answered that.
All right, that was Peter Strzok back in his testimony time. We've learned an awful lot this week about how the Strzok and Page team had a media leak strategy and how they were leaking to the New York Times and the Washington Post. Also, we learned that the CIA was involved. We also know that there was coordination with the FBI and DOJ as it relates to leaks. You have Clapper leaking the dossier to the media. You have Brennan leaking it to Harry Reid, who then leaks it to the media and to others. Then you have Andrew McCabe. He's under criminal investigation. A grand jury's been impaneled as it relates to media leaking and his lying that was involved in the case. Now with these new texts that have been coming out all week with Page and Strzok, well, part of their media leak strategy was on some of the most sensitive items involved and giving it to the New York Times, Washington Post. One has to wonder if that part of the integrity to leak in the middle of an investigation. They leaked before Donald Trump was elected president. They leaked after he was president with the purpose then to destroy him, the purpose in the beginning to prevent him from ever winning. That was the insurance policies that they had in place. When you look at all the characters involved in every level, Comey, Strzok, Page, McCabe, Sally Yates, Bruce Orr, Nellie Orr, Christopher Steele, they have one thing in common. They hate Donald Trump, and they all worked hard, to prevent him from getting elected and him ever being able to govern effectively. You can also add Clapper and Brennan to that list.
2/3 of Americans, and this poll included both Republicans and Democrats, they'd like to see the Mueller probe end before Election Day. That's a CNN poll, by the way. Joining us now, Congressman Todd Rokita, Republican from Indiana. Sir, you called for an end to the Mueller probe on the House floor, and this was weeks ago. But I put it to you, you can't get this. You can't force Mueller to end his probe. He's got unlimited power.
Well, it sure seems that way, Stu, and thanks for having me back. And not only was I on the House floor talking about ending this investigation, we've had a resolution on file for months now, gaining co-sponsors by the minute, that is reflective of what the American people are now saying in the latest poll. Not only do 2/3 of Americans want this witch hunt to end, but 57% of Democrats want this witch hunt to end. So the only one propagating this is Mueller, the liberal media elite, and liberal Democrat elites.
I think the public is generally tired of this.
Right.
It's been dragged on, what is well over a year now, if it's not a year and a half almost. And
You're right.
It never goes away. There are always a strategic leak here and a strategic leak there, more implications here, implications there. It just never goes away. People are sick and tired of it, I think.
Absolutely. A year and a half, 20 million of our taxpayer dollars spent, and biased prosecutors. We see with Strzok bias and corruption and an FBI that needs to be cleaned up, and Mueller's team is rife with Hillary Clinton donors. And so the appearance of impropriety here continues to grow every day. They have no evidence of President Trump colluding or the campaign colluding with Russians or anyone else. And the only evidence they're uncovering so far is actually Hillary Clinton's collusion with Russia. Yes, this has to end.
Well, Todd, could I divide it like this? Republicans, generally, convinced that there's no collusion. They want the Mueller report released before the midterms. Democrats, who are not convinced, they don't really know what's in that report, they want to keep it running beyond the midterms. Is that a fair way to characterize the two-party stance on Mueller?
Well, it's sort of. I mean, it's certainly, the Democrats don't have, the liberal elites have no ideas on their own. Anything that President Trump wants, they don't want, even if they wanted it before. So they're the ones playing politics here. I am happy. I used to be the chief white-collar criminal investigator in the state of Indiana when I was Indiana Secretary of State. You have to let investigations go where the facts are to find the truth. And I think Republicans generally, unless I haven't talked to anyone here in Congress that doesn't understand that, isn't for that. But after a year and a half and $20 million, it's time to rein this in. And that's what my resolution does. It says, put up or shut up, Mueller. If you think you have evidence, tell us when it's going to end. Tell us when you're going to produce it, or get out of this because it's hurting the country.
Todd, would you agree with the following? Not a prayer that he releases before the midterms.
Well, no, I don't agree with that. I wouldn't have filed the resolution. I want this to end, and certainly this Congress. I mean, it's been going on long enough, whether it's right before the midterms or right after. I mean, at this point, you know, it's going to be hard to control that. But really, if he has any integrity, if he believes in the truth of matters versus the politics of matters, he ought to, for the good of the country, bring this to a halt.
Todd Rokita, Republican, Indiana. Thanks for joining us, sir. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stu.